Every empire believes its money will last forever. Every generation trusts that the system that feeds them, pays them, and defines their worth is built on something real. But behind every currency, there's a story. And behind every story, there's a slow decay. What begins as gold ends as paper. What begins as paper ends as code. And what begins as faith ends as doubt. For thousands of years, money has been more than a medium of exchange. It has been a mirror of civilization itself. The Romans had their silver denarius. The British had their gold-backed pound. The Americans, the dollar. And today, the world whispers about crypto, digital coins born from code and rebellion. On the surface, these transitions look like evolution, progress, innovation. But underneath, they reveal something far older, far darker, a repeating pattern of rise, corruption, and collapse. The moment a nation begins to tamper with its money, it begins to tamper with its fate, because money is trust, crystallized belief. And once that trust starts to fracture, collapse follows not in days or weeks, but through generations. It's the quiet death of value before the loud fall of empires. Centuries ago, gold and silver weren't just metals. They were the language of trade, the measure of power, the anchor of empires. Their weight could be held, their shine seen. But over time, rulers discovered something seductive: control. By debasing coins, shaving silver, mixing copper, issuing more than they could back, they could finance wars, feed armies, and buy loyalty. At least for a while. Every empire did it, and every empire paid the price. Rome began it with a whisper. A small reduction in silver purity here, a new emperor's face there. The denarius, once nearly pure silver, was debased over centuries until it was little more than a shell of metal and memory. Inflation rose. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Bread became scarce. Citizens lost faith in the currency, and eventually in the empire itself. Centuries later, the pattern returned with new faces and new banners. The British Empire, at its height, held a gold-backed pound, so stable it was called as good as gold. It became the backbone of global trade, the standard every nation trusted. But wars are hungry, and the 20th century devoured gold like fire devours wood. World War I forced the pound off the gold standard. By World War II, Britain was broke. The empire that once ruled the seas could no longer rule its own balance sheets. And as Britain faded, America rose, carrying the torch of the dollar and the illusion of endless growth. The dollar was backed by gold, yes, but also by something stronger: confidence. It became the world's reserve currency, a symbol of stability after chaos. But in 1971, that too changed. Nixon severed the last tie between the dollar and gold, turning money into pure belief, or pure illusion depending on where one stands. Fiat currency was born not as evolution, but as necessity. The empire had grown too big, the debts too deep. Gold could no longer keep pace with ambition. Now, we stand at the next turn of the wheel. Fiat is fraying. Trust is thinning. Inflation has become the background hum of modern life, a quiet tax on every generation. And from the cracks in the old system, something new is rising, not from governments, but from code. Crypto, the digital offspring of distrust, promises to do what gold once did: anchor value beyond politics, beyond printing presses, beyond power. But history warns, every solution begins as salvation and ends as another illusion. Every cycle repeats, because human nature doesn't change. The question isn't whether crypto is the future. The question is whether the future can escape the pattern. Because this isn't just about money. It's about the story behind it. Gold was trust in nature. Fiat was trust in governments. Crypto is trust in algorithms. But trust, in any form, is fragile. Empires rise not on armies or architecture, but on belief. And when belief breaks, collapse follows like gravity. The transitions from gold to paper to code aren't random evolutions. They're milestones on civilization's road to renewal, or ruin. Each shift begins with hope, grows through exploitation, and ends in reinvention. Every time an empire tries to control value instead of earning it, the system breaks, and something new takes its place. That's the rhythm of history, the silent beat beneath collapse. Collapse doesn't begin with war or invasion. It begins quietly, with the silent erosion of value. When the foundations of an empire start to crack, leaders rarely admit it. Instead, they reach for the oldest trick in civilization's playbook: manipulation of money. It's a way to buy time, to stretch the illusion of prosperity just a little longer. But every empire that tries it discovers the same truth. The printing press can postpone decay, not prevent it. The pattern is always the same. An empire rises on production, discipline, and trust. Its currency becomes a symbol of that strength, a token backed by something tangible: gold, silver, or real goods. Then comes expansion: trade routes, colonies, military campaigns. The empire grows rich, but with wealth comes comfort, and with comfort comes excess. Spending rises. The public grows entitled to the prosperity it once earned. The ruling class learns to promise what it can't afford. And that's where the slow death begins. Debasement isn't just an economic act, it's a moral one. When rulers reduce the purity of their currency, they're not merely changing numbers, they're changing truth itself. They're saying, this metal, this note, this code means what we say it means, even when it doesn't. And for a while it works. Soldiers stay loyal, merchants keep trading, citizens keep consuming. But beneath the surface, trust begins to rot. Rome's emperors discovered this early. Each time the treasury ran low, they ordered more coins minted, thinner, lighter, less pure. They shaved the silver to pay for new conquests. But the more coins they made, the less each was worth. By the 3rd century, the denarius had lost almost all of its silver content. Prices soared, and ordinary Romans, sensing the betrayal, began hoarding real silver and gold. Barter replaced currency. Faith vanished. The empire had traded honesty for time and ran out of both. Fast forward to the 18th and 19th centuries. The British Empire mastered trade and industry. The pound sterling was synonymous with stability. But stability is expensive to maintain. The empire's wars, from Crimea to the colonies, drained gold reserves. Each crisis forced the same decision: protect the standard or protect the illusion of power. And like Rome, Britain chose the illusion. The gold standard was suspended, reinstated, and finally abandoned altogether. The pound survived, but the empire didn't. Then came the 20th century, America's century. The dollar, backed by gold, inherited the world's confidence after 2 global wars. It wasn't just currency, it was dominance wrapped in paper. Countries hoarded it, markets worshipped it, and the U.S. printed it with the calm certainty of empire. But the pattern returned. Wars in Korea, Vietnam, and beyond strained the treasury. The promise that every dollar could be exchanged for gold began to crack. Foreign nations started calling in their claims. And in 1971, President Nixon finally severed the tie. The dollar was no longer a promise, it was faith alone. Fiat currency became the new god of global trade. It's a clever system, because it hides decline behind data. Instead of clipping coins, modern empires dilute value digitally. They inflate through policy, not metal. Central banks lower interest rates, governments issue more debt, and citizens mistake credit for prosperity. But the math is ancient. The more you create, the less it's worth. The more you spend, the more you owe. And eventually, the trust that holds the whole illusion together begins to thin. The irony is that every empire believes it's the exception. Rome believed it, Britain believed it, America believes it. They all think they can outsmart the pattern, that technology, regulation, or clever economics can rewrite the laws of trust. But history is undefeated. No empire has ever printed its way to immortality. And yet, collapse doesn't always mean destruction. In the ruins of each monetary system, something new is born. After Rome, feudal trade networks and local currencies rose. After Britain, the dollar took command. After the dollar's fiat age, perhaps the age of digital assets awaits. Each transition feels revolutionary, but it's just the next verse of the same song. Because when faith in the old system dies, humanity doesn't stop believing. It just believes in something new. That's the pattern. Trust, abuse, collapse, rebirth. Gold to paper, paper to code, and maybe code to something else. The cycle doesn't end because our technology changes. It ends only when our relationship with value changes. And history suggests that may be the hardest transformation of all. If the pattern of collapse is universal, then history is the evidence written in gold dust and paper promises. Empires may differ in language, culture, and ambition, but when it comes to money, their stories rhyme almost perfectly. Each began with honesty, drifted into convenience, and drowned in manipulation. Every coin tells the same confession. Rome was the first great experiment in monetary faith. The denarius, first struck around 211 BCE, was nearly pure silver, the heartbeat of an expanding empire. Soldiers were paid in it, merchants trusted it, and nations accepted it. But as the empire grew, its appetite grew faster. Maintaining vast armies, roads, and wars demanded more silver than Rome could mine. So, the emperors resorted to a quiet theft, reducing the silver content little by little. Under Emperor Nero, the denarius was 94% silver. By the time of Gallienus, it was less than 5%. What had once been wealth became illusion. Citizens hoarded real metal, trade collapsed, and by the late 3rd century, inflation had devoured Rome's economy. The currency failed first. The empire followed. Byzantium, Rome's eastern heir, learned from the mistake for a while. Its solidus coin, introduced by Constantine, remained nearly pure gold for 7 centuries, a miracle of stability. The empire prospered because it respected its money. But even the solidus couldn't escape human greed forever. Wars, corruption, and shrinking borders forced debasement. The hyperpyron, the solidus's later form, was a shadow of its former glory. Once the coin of Christendom, it too dissolved into dust. Centuries later, the Spanish Empire rose on silver. Mountains of it ripped from the veins of the Americas. Ships laden with treasure sailed to Seville, making Spain the richest power in Europe. But the abundance was poison. The influx of silver devalued itself. Prices skyrocketed, domestic industry collapsed, and Spain became addicted to imported goods. The empire was rich in metal, but poor in productivity. The same trap every empire eventually falls into, mistaking possession for power. Then came the British Empire, the global titan of the modern age. For over a century, the gold-backed pound sterling reigned supreme. It was the currency of empires, the standard of civilization. As good as gold, people said, and they meant it. But empire is expensive. The wars of the 20th century drained Britain's coffers. To fight, they printed. To rebuild, they borrowed. The pound held its dignity on the surface, but behind the facade, its gold reserves were bleeding out. The final blow came in 1944, when the Bretton Woods Agreement crowned the US dollar as the new global anchor. The sun didn't just set on the British Empire. It set on the gold-backed pound itself. And so, America inherited the throne. The dollar became not just national currency, but global belief. At first, it was tethered to gold, $35 per ounce, a contract with the world that said, "We will not cheat." But as wars piled up and spending soared, the math stopped adding up. Foreign nations began demanding gold in exchange for their dollars, and America's vaults began to empty. In 1971, Nixon closed the gold window, breaking the promise. The dollar became fiat, money by decree, faith by force. It was the end of the gold era and the dawn of the illusion economy. The short-term effect was prosperity. Freed from the constraint of gold, governments could spend without limit. Debt became the new gold mine, but over time, inflation eroded purchasing power and trust began to shift. The dollar's supremacy depended not on metal, but on the perception of stability. It became an empire of belief, a faith system wrapped in green paper and digital code. Yet, history doesn't stop with America. Other nations followed the pattern and fast forward. Argentina, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, all repeated the same fatal equation. Print more to solve problems created by printing more. Their currencies collapsed into worthlessness, and people turned to dollars, gold, or even crypto for salvation. It's a condensed version of Rome's fall, centuries of decay compressed into decades. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Every monetary system is a psychological system. It works only as long as people believe it does. Once that belief breaks, no army, no central bank, no law can save it. Trust is the invisible gold standard that underwrites all value. From Rome's denarius to Nixon's dollar, the story is one long chain of broken promises, each link forged by the same human desire to create wealth without earning it, to escape the limits of reality, but the limits always return. And when they do, they reset the world. The transitions between gold, fiat, and now crypto aren't technological revolutions. They're emotional ones. Humanity keeps trying to reinvent trust, because trust is what always dies first. History doesn't end. It upgrades its disguise. What began as metal and became paper has now dissolved into numbers on a screen, zeros, ones, and the fragile faith that they mean something. Fiat currency was supposed to be the final evolution of money, the sleek and flexible system that freed us from the old constraints of gold. But, like every chapter before it, its brilliance hides decay. The system that promised stability has become the source of volatility itself. After 1971, money stopped being a measure of value and became a tool of policy. Central banks could create it at will. Politicians could promise endlessly, knowing that the printing press, or later the digital ledger, would always obey. Economies swelled on borrowed air. The illusion of infinite growth became the religion of the modern world. But underneath, the same old pattern stirred. Debt rising faster than production, prices climbing faster than wages, the gap between reality and narrative widening each year. The result was a world addicted to credit. Every boom was built on borrowing, every rescue financed by tomorrow's desperation. From the 1980s to the 2020s, each crisis followed the same script: the crash, the panic, the bailout. Whether it was the dot-com bubble, the housing collapse, or the pandemic stimulus, the answer was always print more. We learned to call it quantitative easing, but in truth, it was the modern empire-S version of coin shaving, a digital debasement too abstract for most to see. And yet, people felt it. They may not understand monetary policy, but they understand the quiet pain of inflation. Groceries rising faster than paychecks, savings shrinking in silence. Trust began to thin. The same way Romans distrusted their denarius, modern citizens began to doubt their dollars. They turned their faith elsewhere, into assets, stocks, property, and eventually something entirely new: code. Crypto didn't emerge as a technology. It emerged as a rebellion. In 2008, as the world's financial system cracked under its own weight, A white paper appeared online, written by someone, or perhaps a collective, under the name Satoshi Nakamoto. It wasn't just code, it was a manifesto. Bitcoin wasn't proposing a new kind of money, it was proposing a new kind of trust. Trust without intermediaries, without governments, without banks. Its message was clear. We can no longer rely on the system to be honest, so we'll build honesty into the math itself. Bitcoin's timing was no coincidence. It was born in the ashes of the Great Recession, when bailouts rewarded the reckless and punished the prudent, when citizens realized that money could be conjured to save corporations, but not them. In that betrayal, crypto found its audience. To believers, it wasn't speculation, it was emancipation, a way to take value back from the institutions that had turned money into illusion. At first, it was small, a digital curiosity traded by visionaries and misfits. But like all revolutions, it spread through emotion, not reason. Crypto became a story, of freedom, of rebellion, of possibility. Each boom was fueled by belief, each crash by disillusionment. Yet the pattern persisted. Distrust the system, build a new one, overpromise, collapse, rebuild. Even in its volatility, crypto mirrors the empires it seeks to escape. Because the irony is profound, crypto is designed to end the manipulation of money, but it has also become the new stage for it. Pump and dump schemes, speculative manias, digital empires rising and falling in months, all symptoms of the same human impulse that destroyed gold-backed coins and inflated fiat currencies. Technology changes faster than human nature. Still, something deeper is happening beneath the noise. Crypto is teaching a generation to question what money really is. For the first time since gold, people are once again asking, what gives this value? Who controls it? Why should I trust it? These questions are dangerous because they pierce the illusion that holds the modern economy together. And as governments react, regulating, banning, or even imitating crypto with their own digital currencies, the struggle for control intensifies. Central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, promise efficiency, but also surveillance. They were the Empire-esque counter-rebellion, an attempt to digitize fiat before code fully replaces it. The battle isn't just about technology, it's about the definition of freedom itself. So here we are, standing in the overlap of ages, between the dying world of fiat and the unborn world of digital value. One built on trust in governments, the other on trust in algorithms, both fragile, both human. The same drama, rewritten for the information age. Whether crypto becomes the next gold or the next illusion depends not on code, but on conscience. Because the pattern isn't about systems, it's about us. Every financial collapse is, at its core, a human story. Charts and data can map inflation, debt, and collapse, but they can't capture what it feels like to live through one. The real cost of a failing currency isn't measured in interest rates or exchange values. It's measured in something quieter: trust, dignity, and time. Money has always been more than economics. It's a language of human worth. When that language changes too quickly, people lose their bearings. In Rome, citizens watched prices double while wages stayed still. Bread became a luxury, savings evaporated. People didn't just lose coins, they lost the meaning of effort itself. What happens to motivation when work no longer translates into stability? Collapse begins there, in the human heart, long before the borders fall. Centuries later in Weimar Germany, people carried wages in wheelbarrows. Photographs show them burning banknotes for warmth because fire made them worth more than shops did. Economists call it hyperinflation. Psychologists call it despair. Children grew up watching their parents' hard work turn to dust. That memory lingered. So much that decades later, Germans would rather suffer austerity than trust a printing press again. Trauma has a longer half-life than currency. In the modern age, collapse looks different, quieter, cleaner, wrapped in the language of policy. No one prints trillion-mark notes anymore, they just add zeros to a screen. But the emotional result is the same. Every generation works harder for less. A home becomes a dream, retirement becomes a mirage. People chase side hustles, crypto bets, and speculative bubbles, not out of greed, but out of quiet panic, the fear of standing still in a world that keeps inflating away their effort. We like to think of money as neutral, but it's profoundly moral. It rewards what a society values. When money rewards speculation over creation, debt over discipline, illusion over integrity, it reshapes human behavior. We become reflections of the system that pays us. Empires don't just debase their coins, they debase their citizens, teaching them that shortcuts matter more than craftsmanship, that appearance outweighs substance, that consumption is identity. That's the unseen decay, not of metal, but of meaning. In every historical collapse, there's a moment when people stop believing that fairness is possible. When they realize the system isn't broken, it's built that way. And when belief breaks, civilizations begin to unravel from within. You can hear it today in the quiet exhaustion of the middle class, in the cynicism of youth who see debt as destiny, in the markets that cheer for chaos because chaos pays better than creation. The shift to crypto, in this sense, isn't just financial, it's emotional. A collective act of defiance. A generation saying, we no longer trust you with our future. But rebellion is a fragile hope. Many who enter the world of digital freedom find themselves trapped in new illusions, quick profits, false profits, endless volatility. The pattern repeats. Because money doesn't just represent value, it amplifies whatever we are inside. And yet, in this chaos, something deeply human persists. The search for honest value. Gold, fiat, crypto, these are just vessels. What humanity keeps trying to build is a system where effort and reward align, where creation outweighs corruption, where value feels real again. It's the same longing that drove Roman farmers, British merchants, American dreamers, and now digital pioneers. The tragedy of monetary collapse is that it often destroys trust faster than it can rebuild it. But the hope is that in the ruins, people remember what mattered. After every crash, some rediscover community over consumption, skills over speculation, truth over trend. Collapse, in this sense, is purification, painful but clarifying. It strips away illusion until only what's essential remains. And maybe that's what every cycle is really about. Not just the death of money, but the rebirth of meaning. Because at the end of every empire, the same question echoes, what is value and who decides it? When the answer shifts from governments to individuals, from authority to awareness, perhaps that has not collapse at all. Perhaps it's the beginning of something new. The human story of money is one of lost faith and rediscovered truth over and over again. Each age thinks it's modern. Each learns it's merely repeating the oldest story in the world, that trust is the rarest currency of all. Every collapse feels like an ending, but history whispers that it's really a reset, the quiet turning of a wheel that never stops. Civilizations rise, decay, and reinvent themselves not because they want to, but because they must. The laws of trust demand it. When the story of money becomes too detached from the story of reality, something new always emerges to bridge the gap. Today, we're living through that turning point again. The world stands between systems, one dying, one unborn. The fiat order, built on debt and confidence, is fraying at its edges. Governments inflate away their promises, while citizens search for shelter in assets, commodities, and code. The old contract between rulers and the ruled, you work, we preserve your value, has been quietly broken. And in that breach, a new chapter is writing itself in real time. Crypto may not be the final form of money, but it is the signal of change, a digital heir to gold, its honesty, and fiat, and its convenience. It carries within it the same paradox every new system holds: freedom and fragility, innovation and illusion. Some see it as salvation, others as the next speculative empire waiting to collapse. Both may be right. Because every reset begins with chaos. The question isn't to whether the world will move on from fiat, it is what it will move toward. Central banks are already preparing their own replacements, digital currencies with programmable rules, infinite visibility, and perfect control. It's the empire's counterattack, the illusion reborn in cleaner code. If crypto is the rebellion, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, are the restoration. Money may become more efficient, but less free. Transactions faster, but more observed. And in that trade-off, humanity will face a familiar choice: comfort or sovereignty. History suggests that we rarely choose freedom at first. The Roman citizen accepted debased coins for the promise of peace. The British worker trusted paper over gold for the promise of recovery. The modern consumer may embrace digital fiat for the promise of safety. But beneath each promise lies the same surrender, the quiet exchange of independence for stability. Only when the illusion cracks does the awakening begin. And maybe that's why collapse is necessary. It's the universe's way of forcing honesty. When systems grow too corrupt to reform from within, they fall, not as punishment, but as purification. Each fall wipes away the arrogance of control and reminds humanity that value isn't created by decree, but by trust, labor, and truth. What follows collapse is never predictable, but it's always human. In the ruins, new systems rise, smaller, simpler, more honest. The medieval peasants who traded in local silver after Rome's fall weren't economists. They were survivors rediscovering fairness. The traders who rebuilt after the Great Depression weren't theorists. They were pragmatists rebuilding faith, one transaction at a time. The coders, miners, and digital visionaries of today may be doing the same, rebuilding trust in a form the world hasn't yet learned to understand. Because maybe the future of money isn't gold or paper or crypto. Maybe it's awareness, a world where value is transparent, where trust is distributed, where no one can hide illusion behind policy. Technology gives us that potential, but only consciousness can make it real. The wheel of history doesn't stop, but it can evolve. Collapse doesn't have to mean chaos. It can mean correction, a clearing of illusions that allows something truer to grow. Humanity may yet learn to create money that measures value instead of distorting it. that serves people instead of enslaving them, that reminds us that wealth is not infinite digits, but finite meaning. So as we stand between eras, one fading into debt, the other awakening in code, the question isn't what will replace fiat, it's what will we believe in next. Because belief is the seed of every empire, every currency, every civilization. When belief shifts, the world changes. We've seen gold lose its shine, paper lose its promise, and code begin its rebellion. But the story isn't over. It's looping, waiting for the next generation to decide whether they'll repeat the pattern or rewrite it. History has never punished humanity for collapse. It has invited it to evolve. The fall is not the end. It's the sound of the old world making room for the new. And so the question remains, whispered through centuries of coins, notes, and code. Will this next reset be our ruin or our renaissance?